DreAllDay.com.
You are now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us out there, especially yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together. We have streamlined this entire process. We've codified our entire system. We wrote a book on the subject. We are giving you a daily masterclass. We got a university in here, so you only have to overspend and go into debt at any traditional colleges anymore. You can come to our university and get everything that you need to know, all under this philosophy that is called work on your game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic, we're talking about building the long tail. Building the long tail. Yes, like the tail on a dog, but I don't mean that kind of tail. Now, the concept of the long tail, the first time it was ever introduced to me, the first time I ever heard of it was through a guy by the name of Kevin Kelly. He had written this article called 1,000 True Fans. This is way back in, this had to be maybe 2007. Early days of, well, at least to me, early days of blogging and early days of just content creation, period. I don't even think we were using the phrase content. And Kevin Kelly was introducing this very concept of, if you have 1,000 people who are really bought into what you're doing, so this is not you need to have 1 million subscribers or X number of likes or followers, just 1,000 people who are really bought into you and they're buying the stuff that you're selling. It's not like you're selling them 1 million things every single day, but they're buying in. That's enough for you to sustain yourself. And he was using the example of like a music band. You're a music band, you put out an album or two every year, then you do shows and you sell some merchandise. You can make a full-time living and be a band for your career. That can be your full-time career and support yourself and your family for all of your professional life with just 1,000 people who really fuck with what you're doing. That was the first time I ever heard the concept of the long tail. Now, reading this definition of the long tail, and I'm looking at from Wikipedia, it says the following. In statistics and in business, a long tail of distributions of numbers is the portion of distribution having many occurrences far from the central part of the distribution. In other words, this is the tail ends of the bell curve. So we're talking about the long tail going towards the right. So if you look at a bell curve, let's say the height distribution of people, in the middle are the average height. So if the average man is 5'9", I don't know what the average male height is. Well, let's say it's 5'9". Most of the people are in that 5'9", 5'6", 5'10", maybe 6 feet area. And then you got the few people on the far end, the long tail of that curve. You got the 7-footers and the guys who are 6'9". So the long tail, when it comes to what we're talking about here today, we're talking about in business, and we're talking about when it comes to your audience, when it comes to what you create and what you produce. I'm going to explain to you why we're talking about it here today, but it's really about creating things that give you more chances of success. In other words, if you're a parent, for example, using that same example I just gave with the height distribution, and you have one child, there's a good chance your child is going to be somewhere in that average height distribution of male or female. But if you have 2 children, now you're giving yourself another chance to get a 7-footer. Let's say you want a ball player, you want a basketball player, you want a 7-footer. All right, your second child gives you more chances of getting one. Then your third child, then your fourth child, and maybe whoever the mother and father of these children are probably have something to do with it as well. Because usually tall kids have tall parents. But the whole point, the reason why I even thought of it here today, of this topic, is because I'm reading this book called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And he talked about Walt Disney. Everybody's familiar with Disney, right? Disney World and Disney movies. Walt Disney, in the early 1900s, there was a certain point where he had made hundreds of short films, and people liked his films. He had an audience, I guess 1,000 true fans, maybe even more than that. They weren't true fans in the case of what Kevin Kelly was talking about, because distribution was not set up the same way in the 1930s that it was in 2007. But he had all these fans who loved his short films, but his films weren't making any money. Walt Disney was not doing well financially, and nor was the Disney company doing very well. The first Disney studio actually went bankrupt. So Walt was he was a good creator, but he wasn't doing that well on the business side of things. Then he made this 83-minute film that you may have heard of. It was called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That film generated $8 million in 6 months. And that film turned Walt Disney into a superstar. He won an Oscar award. His company paid off all their debts. They moved into a brand new studio in Burbank, California, where they still are to this very day. And the rest is history. We all know who Walt Disney is. I didn't even explain that point to you, or explain his life to you. The whole point that Hauser was making in bringing up Walt Disney in a book about the psychology of money was Walt built Disney the same way that successful financial investors do their business. And what they do, and through Morgan's explanation, is that they acquire vast quantities of a thing, and then a subset of those acquisitions become the big winners over time. In other words, an investor, and again, this is by what he was explaining in his book, and the book again is called The Psychology of Money. And by the way, anytime I mention a book on this show, you should go buy it and read it, without me even having to tell you that. But he said, investors will acquire several different stock portfolios. They'll get a whole bunch of them. They don't pick individual stocks, they pick portfolios. They get a whole bunch of those portfolios, and then over time, a handful of those stocks within all those portfolios become the winners that make them all their money and make them the successful people that they get on the covers of magazines about money, and they get to write books and they become famous because they made all this money. And then people pick and choose certain parts of their story and say, hey, this is what you should do if you want to be successful as well. And this is what Hauser was explaining. It worked in business with Walt Disney. It works in investing with these people that he's talking about, and it works in many other areas of life, which is what we're talking about here today. And that is the very concept of the long tail. In other words, if I was to put this in work on your game terms, very simple terms for you to understand, 99% of the work that you do is not going to be the winner for you. 99% of the work that you do may feel like a quote unquote waste. It may feel like you wasted your time, wasted your effort. It didn't do anything. It was a loser. It did absolutely nothing to move you forward. But is the 1% out of the 100% pie, 99% of it does nothing, but that 1% that does work, that's what makes you a star. That 1% is what's going to blow you up. And that long tail, again, is the small end of the distribution of outcomes. So you take all your results that you get is the few that's on that very end, the smallest end of that bell curve. Those are the things that make all the difference. And I want you to, there's some things that you need to understand about that. The concept seems pretty simple, right? But there's some things that you need to understand as we get into the detail of this that I want to make sure that you get. So pay close attention to what I'm saying here. You should pay close attention every day. Pay close attention today too. Point number one, the topic once again is building the long tail. Number one, understand something. It is normal for a lot of things that you do and produce and try to fail. I'm going to repeat that point because I want to make sure that you heard me. It is normal for a lot of things that you try, that you produce, that you try, that you want to sell, that you send out to the market. It is normal for them to fail, which means you shouldn't be looking at yourself as a failure just because something you tried failed. What you should do is move on to the next thing. And we're going to get to that in a minute. So when you don't think that when you look at someone who is a picture of success, however you define that word success, they have a certain number of subscribers or followers, they are making a certain amount of money, they got certain material possessions, they have a lot of things on their resume that show that they're doing great. Understand that they probably had a whole lot of things that did not work, that didn't make it to the resume. All right, they don't go on a resume because they were failures. They didn't work out. They basically flopped. But then they kept going. They did the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And then the few successes that they did achieve, those are the things that become the resume. But most of us, in our short-sightedness as human beings, in our emotional states as human beings, because we're not computers, we're not automatons, in our emotional states as human beings, and because we don't do the work to dive deep into other people's lives, and we just look at whatever we can get from the surface of other people, because we put most of our attention on ourselves, and all human beings do this, we don't bother to notice this point right here. That's why this point is so important. I'm gonna give the first point once more. The topic again today is building a long tail. It is normal for a lot of things that you do to fail. That does not, and when a lot of things that you do fail, that does not preclude you from becoming a success. We only take note of and we hear stories about the big wins that people get, whether it's you or other people. We only hear about the big wins, but understand something. The big winners also have lots and lots of failures that produce nothing worth writing about, things that don't make it into their books, things that they don't tell stories about, unless it's something that can be funny or maybe irreverent that they can bring up that kind of balances out all the success that they're showing you. But listen, I've had tons of business ideas, products that I tried, content that I put out that didn't really do anything. Things that I killed off or things that I put out and it came and went. Nobody really paid attention to it. I don't pay attention to it anymore because it didn't really work. Because it just wasn't useful to me anymore. I said, all right, it's time to get rid of this. Let's move on to the next thing. But you know what I did the next day? Every time something like that happened, do you know what I did the next day after that thing failed to work? I went and made another one. All right, when that product didn't work, all right, let me go create another product. All right, this content didn't really land the way that I wanted it to. You know what I'm gonna do the next day? I'm gonna make some more content. All right, this is not really working the way I wanted to. Let me try something else. Let's see how that one works. I went and did the next thing the next day. To this day, I have published over 8,000 videos online. 8,000. And I don't know any individual person who's published more videos than me. So there are people who might have taken a video, then they cut it up into different pieces, then they take one video, turn it into 20. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about original content. I published over 8,000 videos online. By my last count, 67 of 8,000. Again, do that math on there. 67 of 8,000 videos have over 100,000 views. That is 0.008%. That's less than 1% of the content that I've created video-wise have gotten over 100,000 views on those videos. Overall, if the only goal, if I was basing my whole career and my whole life on how many views videos are getting, you would say that 99% of my career then would be a failure. But the ones that worked, of those 67, the ones that popped off, those actually were the seeds from my business because they became lead magnets towards products that I started selling, which led me to entrepreneurship, which led to what we have now, Work on Your Game Incorporated, and every other thing that I do. Only 67. 67 winners out of 8,000 tries. When I was playing basketball, I played for years. I started playing when I was around 14 at the park every single day, playing pickup, working out by myself, go to high school, try out for the team, playing all the time in gym class. That's all we did in high school and gym. We would just play basketball, playing basketball all those days, playing pickup as I grew up through high school, playing in the local recreational leagues, trying out for teams, not making it, trying out again, not making it, just continuing to work on my game. Went and played in high school 1 year, didn't really play that much. Walked on in college, 4 years of college, a ton of pickup games, ton of recreational league games, tryouts, playing on teams in college, all of those things. Didn't really have much of a resume after all of that. Graduated from college, 22 years old, had played 1 year high school, all the college experience, all the rec leagues I had played in and teams and pickup games and practices, all of that. I didn't really have anything tangible that I could show to somebody who didn't know me about my basketball career up to that point. I didn't really have much. But then this is what happened. I went to this exposure camp in Orlando, Florida in the summer of 2005. And the camp was only 2 days. It was Saturday and Sunday. We played 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday. That 2 days, that 48-hour period validated the whole 9 years up to that point because of my performance over those 2 days. So if we really did the math, if we said I played for 2 days in Orlando in 2005, I've been playing for 9 years up to that point. So 9 years is 365 days in a year. That's 3,285 days. And let's say I played basketball on, let's say 60% of those days I was playing basketball. That's 1,971 days. So 2 days divided by 1,971 days is 0.001%. That means, or 0.1% rather, would be more accurate, move that decimal point over. 0.1% of my basketball performance up through age 23 is what made my career happen. It wasn't all the work that I did. It was, but it wasn't. If we're just looking at things rationally and we're looking at what actually produced the result. When we talk about that 80-20 rule, this is not the 80-20 rule. This is the 0.1, 99.9 rule right here, or 99.9.1 rule. Is that 2 days made all of that other stuff matter. 2 days made all of that other stuff become a relevant part of the story. Because had that 2 days not happened, all the other stuff that I just told you about that 9 years would not be relevant. It would not matter. Nobody would care. Why? Because it did not produce a success. So what you need to understand here in this first point, it is normal for a lot of things to fail, is that you're going to do a whole lot of work. You're going to invest a whole lot of time. You're going to try a whole lot of things. And it's only going to be a small few things. So we talk about that 80-20 rule. 80% of your results come from 20% of your inputs. This is going to be even a wider distribution than that. This is going to be like the 99-1 rule. 99% of your results are going to come from 1% of the inputs if you are playing the long game and you understand this concept of the long tail. But it requires a few other things besides you just understanding. So now that you got the understanding that most of the things you do are going to fail and this is okay, and there are plenty of stories of people who did this. Walt Disney was one. I use myself as another, and there are a bunch more we're going to get into here. Let's move on to point number 2. The topic, once again, is building the long tail. Number 2, to make the long tail work, you got to try lots of things. I think I made this clear already. I've used a couple examples. Walt Disney had made hundreds of films before he made Snow White and became a superstar. I played hundreds of basketball games before I went to Orlando at that exposure camp and became a professional. You got to try things in order to make something work. I mean, it's a simple enough concept, but how many people are not doing it? How many of you right now have tried something that you wanted to do, you tried it a few times, didn't quite get the result that you wanted, and right now you're stalled out, you're not really trying it or putting any effort into it right now because you're frustrated about the fact that it wasn't producing the kind of results that you expected to get or that you would want to get or that you're comparing yourself to somebody else to by this point? I know I'm talking to somebody. This guy by the name of Russell Brunson, who has a podcast called Marketing Secrets. I mentioned it in my podcast that I listened to, most recent version of that I did. And Russell is the creator of a software called ClickFunnels. Any of you who's in the marketing world online, you know who ClickFunnels is. You know who Russell Brunson is. One thing that Russell talks about all the time when it comes to marketing, he says you have to throw out a whole lot of hooks in order to see what works. In other words, let's say you created a product. You created a new sweatshirt. You want to sell your sweatshirt, but your sweatshirt hasn't really been selling up to this point. You create a new microphone that people use for podcasting. It's not quite working. You have a new iPhone holder that can help people hold their phones against their pockets, and it won't break. And if they drop their phone, it won't smash the screen of the phone. You have this new product, but for whatever reason, it's not quite selling the right way. What Russell was saying is that not that you have to go create 100 new products. What he's saying is you might need to try 100 different hooks for how you're going to get people to care about that one product. In other words, you put that product out, you have that idea, you might have to pitch it a lot of different ways to find the thing that is really connecting with the right person. Because you can have a product that's maybe is a great product, but if you're not pitching it the right way to the consumers, they won't understand it as a great product for them, they won't buy it. But then when you find the right way of talking about that product, the product has not changed whatsoever. Only thing that changed the way that you talk about it, all of a sudden everybody's buying into it. Like, oh, that's interesting. Now I'm paying attention. Now I want to buy it. That's what they call a hook in the marketing world. You use a hook. Your headline is a hook. The title that I use for this episode is a hook. A picture is a hook. A caption is a hook. A hook are just different ways to grab people's attention. Now, once you have their attention, now they see what your thing really is, and now you can find out, okay, is my problem the hook? All right, now the hook is working. All right, let's see. Is the problem the way that I'm talking about it? Now they're paying. Listen to how I'm talking about it. Now, okay, what am I offering them? Is the offer working? Okay, maybe then that's the thing. If the offer's not there, I got them hooked. I get them to listen to what I'm saying. Now they're not buying it. Okay, now maybe the offer is wrong. Maybe the product is wrong. Maybe I got to change that up. Maybe I need a completely new product. They call that hook, story, and offer. But you got to keep trying different hooks, then different stories, then different offers to find the right combination of what works. Most people don't do this. They throw out one thing, and then when it doesn't work, they don't even ask themselves which element is not working. They don't even ask themselves what's something that I can iterate, something I can change about what I'm doing here to make it work. What they do is just say, all right, obviously this one didn't work. Let me try something else. That didn't work. Let me try something else. That didn't work. Let me try something else. But they're not even looking into why it's not working. And one of the main reasons people don't look into why it's not working is they don't know what questions to ask. They don't understand the concept of insight, which I talked about in episode 1177. And often you can't get insight just talking to yourself. You get insight by talking to other people. You get insight by finding a mentor or a coach or someone who is smarter than you, who knows things that you don't know. Russell Brunson also talks about, before he launched his company, ClickFunnels, which became I guess what they call a unicorn in the business world, because I forget what the exact accomplishment you had to have to be called that, but his company's worth like over $100 million, might even be $1 billion company to this point. But Russell talked about how he and his guys, himself from his marketing experience and his friends, launched 150 different products. And they launched 150 different products before they landed on what became ClickFunnels. And they launched that, I believe it was 2014 when ClickFunnels came out. 150, and you imagine 150 different products, and every single product they created, they had to create a sales page, they had to create a sales funnel. And Russell was talking about how, listen, before ClickFunnels, the only way to create a sales funnel is that we had to storyboard every funnel, every page on that funnel, then we had to pay different people to put the thing together, and these funnels were costing us $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to put together. It cost us $30,000 to put together a funnel, and we did 150 different products before we landed on the one that worked. Do you understand that? Can you do the math on that? I'm pausing there so you can let that one sink in. And this is a guy who's looked at as a genius in the marketing world. Now, how much of a genius do you got to be to try 150 things to get one that works? Is that something that you could do? Amazon. You remember when Amazon put out the Fire phone? I think they were putting that out to compete with iPhone. How did that turn out? How many of you got a Fire phone? I don't think anybody. What drives most of Amazon's revenue? Two things. Amazon Prime and Amazon Web Services. That's it. How many different products has Amazon tried? How many different ventures has Amazon jumped into? How many more will they jump into in the future? Amazon is in everything right now. Amazon is the everything store. That's how they came out, right? The everything store. Two things drive the majority of Amazon's revenue. Amazon Prime and Amazon Web Services. That's it. Even though they tried all of these other things, and Amazon is the biggest company in the world right now. The richest man in the world on paper is the guy who owns Amazon. And two things have driven everything for him. He's been in business for 30 years. Facebook. What drives Facebook's revenue? Advertising. Facebook does 93, I don't know if it was million, I think it was billion dollars in advertising, or is 93% of their company. Don't hold me to that number. But the majority of Facebook's revenue comes from advertising. All right, that's where they make their money. They don't make their money in the marketplace where you're selling stuff and they get a little percentage. They don't make their money off of your business page. They don't make their money off of anything else that you could pay Facebook for. They make their money off of advertising. Even though Facebook has tried 1,000 different things, 1,000,000 different things. How many different products has Facebook bought? They purchased Instagram for billions of dollars. They tried to purchase Snapchat for another couple billions. They purchased a bunch of other smaller companies that I don't even know about for millions and billions of dollars. What makes all of their money is the advertising platform. Even though they tried all of these other things and they have all of these assets, it is one thing that's driving everything for them. They make all of their money off of that. Apple. What drives all Apple's revenue? The phone that you're listening to this on right now. That's it. Not the little pencil, not the AirPods, not the computers, just the phone. That's it. Not Apple Music, none of that. Not the Apple Card, none of that. The phone. What's the point that I'm making here? When you try all of these different things, when you keep trying different things, if you got good people working with you and good people on your team, eventually you're going to land on something, but you got to keep trying and keep iterating. I read that the acceptance rates, when people apply to work at Google, you know how many people actually get hired at Google? 0.2% of the people who apply get hired. 0.2%. Means 99.8% don't get the job. Facebook, 0.1% get hired. Apple is 2%. So I guess Apple's the nicest company. 98 is a 98% chance you won't get the job when you apply at Apple. At Google is even worse. The long tails, even when it comes to the people that they hire, they're not even hiring most of the people that come in, just the way that most of their products don't work. All of these companies have sent hundreds and maybe even thousands of products to market, but only a handful of winners make all the difference. But they keep working. They keep trying. Did Amazon quit when the Fire phone didn't work? Did Apple quit when who knows how many products Apple's tried that didn't work? When Steve Jobs came in and killed all their product line, did they quit? No, they said we're going to focus on a few things. And they continue to focus on the things that are actually working. Warren Buffett. Everyone knows Warren Buffett as one of the richest men in the world, and he's this investing genius, at least according to conventional wisdom. Here's what Warren Buffett said in 2013 at his annual investors meeting. He said, I've owned about 400 to 500 stocks in my life. The majority of my money was made on 10 of those stocks. He's owned 400 to 500. The majority of his money was made on 10 of them. Now, how do you know which 10? Well, here's the thing. Warren Buffett didn't say he knew which 10. That's why he got so many of them, and then he just sat on them and did nothing. Anyone who knows anything about Warren Buffett or you study investing, you know that the famous thing about Warren Buffett is that he buys stocks and he does nothing with it. He just buy and hold is what they call it. Just buy it and just keep it and just see where it goes. That's it. That's what Warren Buffett does. 10 of the 500 made him all his money. That's 2%. Notice how that number, that small, this tiny percentage keeps coming up over and over again. But understand something. If you're not active enough, how can you ever get to the point of a Google or a Facebook or Amazon or a Warren Buffett? So you can't get to the point of landing on the idea that became Amazon Prime unless you're out there every year trying new different things until you find the Amazon Prime. Trying new different stuff till you land on what becomes the iPhone. Trying things until you land on what becomes Facebook advertising. George Soros said, it's not whether you are right or wrong that's important in life. What matters is how much you succeed when you are right and how much you lose when you are wrong. And I think if you look at all these examples, even if my examples I'm giving you from my own life, this bears out very well. Moving on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is understanding and taking advantage of the long tail and building. First of all, understanding, then building, then taking advantage of the long tail in your own life and your career. Number 3, understand that the long tail. Everything that we're talking about here is not about being a genius. It is not about having the smartest people around you, though that absolutely does help. It's not about you being super talented at what you do, though it does help to be talented and have some skill, have some knowledge and smart people around you. The long tail is a discipline. That's what the long tail is the discipline of continuing to show up day after day to do the work and getting good people around you and keeping them around you and continuing to show up even when things are not working as you have expected them to work. Do you see where the principles of the work on your game philosophy fit right into what the long tail is about? Napoleon Bonaparte, known as, he is recognized by many as the greatest war general in history. This is what he said. He defined a military genius as, quote, the man who can do the average thing when everyone else is going crazy, close quote. That is discipline. Can you stick to your guns and keep doing what you set out to do, even though there's a whole lot of craziness going on and everyone around you is losing their minds? This is, as Morgan talked about in his book. Again, that book is called The Psychology of Money. He said the stock investor who stays in the game and continues to invest in a disciplined way. They stay steady in their investing, even when there's a recession going on and everybody's pulling their money out of the market and everybody's looking at that investor and saying, you're crazy. Why are you still putting money into the market? Don't you see it falling apart? The disciplined investor who understands the long tail continues to invest and just sticks to their guns because they understand that when the market goes down, eventually that market is going to come back up. Whereas everybody else, because of their psychology, again, the book is called The Psychology of Money. Not the tactics of money, not the talent of money, not the strategy of money, the psychology. All of this is mental. This is a mental game, everybody. When everybody else is pulling their money out, the investor who sticks with it and keeps doing what they set out to do. This is the content creator who keeps publishing even though they're not getting much attention. This is the person who comes to me and says, well, Dre, I've been blogging, but my blog posts are only getting like 2 views and nobody's opening my emails. And I posted something on Instagram and only got 15 likes. And I'm posting videos and they're not even getting that many views. And I don't have that many subscribers. I got a podcast, but I don't have any ratings yet. The content creator who sticks to it and keeps doing it, eventually they hit it. They land on a hit. And then everything starts working. Then everything matters. Then everything is worth it. But you have to stay in the game. You can't even get to that point if you quit the game. You got to stay in the game. The long tail, everybody, is much more mental than it is physical or tactical. So the question is, can you stay in the game even when it looks like you shouldn't stay in the game? Even when you got reasonable, smart people who are just as human as you are and their psychology is getting the better of them, can you stay in the game even when they're all telling you should get out? Or even when you see them getting out? I talked about this a little bit, or I touched on it rather, in episode 1104. The topic was untapped potential or a bum who is struggling to be mediocre. How do you know which one you are in life? In episode number 885, I told you how to stay in ass-kicking mode. How do you stay focused and play the long game of life when things don't seem to be working the way that you want them, when you want it to work, and stay focused on doing your thing? Episode number 314, how to play and win the long game of life. Episode 254, long-term success requires long-term work. And I want to tell you one more where I talked about the many stages of the marathon, episode number 1457, episode 1044, how to finish the marathon strong, and episode number 360, life being a marathon. This is all about understanding the long run and the long race in order to build that long tail. Let's recap today's class, which is, once again, building the long tail in life. Again, that book is that planted the seed for this episode. It's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Walt Disney made hundreds of films that weren't really doing well. He had fans, but they weren't doing well financially until he made Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. All of a sudden, he became a superstar, and everything became everything about Disney after that point. But it was only because he had made all of those films up to that point that he was in position to have made the film that became the one that blew him and his business up. But you got to be willing to do that work. 99% is not going to win, 1% does. Number one, it is normal for a lot of things to fail. Many people don't understand this. We only take note of the stories of the big wins when somebody gets a huge success, but we don't even pay attention to or even know about the many times that things were not working. So when people say things like, well, bet on yourself, and they become successful, understand that the long tail works also with people. Somebody bets on themselves and they win, but we don't pay attention to the 99 other people who bet on themselves the same way and lost on that exact same bet. Only the person who won gets a movie made about them. But understand, I made a ton of content. I put out a ton of products, had a lot of business ideas that did not work, did not succeed, a bunch of videos that came and went, even episodes that come and go. But then when the few that do work, that makes up for everything else. I played ball for 9 years, didn't have any resume, didn't have any game film, nobody saying that I was going to be anything in basketball, even at age 23. Then I went to an exposure camp for 2 days, and what I did at that 2 days changed everything for me. Why? Because I stayed in the game. Number two, to make the long tail work, you got to have lots of things out there that you're trying. Russell Brunson talked about throwing out hooks, changing your stories, making different offers until you find the right combination that works. Now, he launched 150 different products before he created the product that made him a $100 million company. Amazon, what drives most of their revenue? Two things: Prime and Amazon Web Services. Facebook is just ads. Apple is just the phone. Even though all of these companies have tried thousands of products, they have tried thousands of ideas, they only have a few that are actually doing everything for them. Warren Buffett said he owned 500 stocks. 10 of them were the ones that made him all the money. If you're not active enough, you can never get to this point. As George Soros said, it's not whether you're right or wrong that matters. It's how much you make when you're right and how much you lose when you are wrong. And number three, the long tail is a discipline. Napoleon said a military genius is the man who can do the average thing when everyone else is going crazy. This is the investor who stays in the game and continues to follow their principles even when everyone else is emotional and losing their minds. In this sense, the long tail is much more mental than it is physical or tactical. The question is, can you stay in the game even when everybody else is losing their minds and running around like a chicken with his head cut off and getting out of the game? Can you do it? If so, the long tail can work in your favor. This is not the 80-20 rule. This is the 99-1 rule. You want to learn the discipline that will help you stay in the game. First of all, get in the game if you're on the sideline, then stay in the game so you can get to these outcomes that I'm talking about. Take my 30 Days of Discipline course. You can get that exclusively at Work on Your Game University by going to workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all day.